The isolated cabin, nestled deep within the shadowed embrace of the Redwood National Park, stood cloaked in an unsettling silence, broken only by the whisper of ancient pines swaying overhead and the distant, mournful cry of an unseen owl. Its remote location had initially appealed to Leo, a writer seeking solace and inspiration after a particularly brutal bout of writer's block and a recent, painful breakup that had left him feeling adrift and hollow. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood, held a peculiar stillness, an almost suffocating quality that belied the vast, open expanse of the forest. The cabin itself, quaint but undeniably old, with rough-hewn logs and a perpetually creaking porch swing, exuded a pervasive sense of loneliness, as if it had witnessed countless seasons of solitude, silently observing the fleeting human lives that passed through its weathered doors. Leo, a man in his mid-30s with a perpetually thoughtful expression and a tendency to retreat into his own mind, craved the profound isolation the cabin offered. He yearned for the quiet, believing that the absence of urban distractions would allow his muse to finally speak, to unravel the tangled knots of his thoughts and emotions. His only true companion in this wilderness was Buster, his golden retriever, a beacon of joyous energy and unwavering affection, whose golden fur and perpetually wagging tail were a stark contrast to Leo's own internal turmoil. Buster was more than a pet. He was family, a furry anchor in the turbulent seas of Leo's life, and his boundless enthusiasm usually served as a comforting antidote to any burgeoning unease at their arrival at the cabin, while picturesque was marked by an unsettling oddity from Buster. As Leo pulled his old Jeep onto the narrow gravel track that led to the cabin, the dog, usually ecstatic to explore new surroundings, let out a low guttural whine, pressing himself against Leo's side with an uncharacteristic fear. Once inside, Buster became agitated, pacing relentlessly, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a jittery nervousness. His eyes, typically full of playful mischief, now darted into shadowed corners, fixed on patches of wall or floor where Leo saw absolutely nothing, his tail tucked tight between his legs. This unusual behavior was the first subtle tremor, a discordant note in the symphony of anticipated peace. The cabin itself was a rustic relic, steeped in the natural grandeur of the surrounding forest. Its windows, small and numerous, offered fragmented views of ancient redwoods towering like silent sentinels, their colossal trunks disappearing into a perpetual mist overhead. Inside, the main living area was dominated by a massive stone fireplace, its hearth stained with the soot of countless fires. The furnishings were sparse, heavy, and aged, giving the small space's somber, almost oppressive feel. A narrow, winding staircase led to a single loft bedroom, shrouded in perpetual twilight, while beneath the cabin, a small, dark cellar door, secured with a heavy, rusted padlock, seemed to almost blend into the floorboards, whispering of forgotten secrets. First truly unsettling incident occurred on their second night. Leo was engrossed in his writing, the rhythmic tap of his keyboard the only sound, when Buster, who had been sleeping peacefully by the fireplace, suddenly sprang awake, a low, menacing growl rumbling deep in his chest. His fur bristled along. His spine and his hackles rose, transforming him into a creature of pure instinctual aggression. He stared intently at the closed cellar door, his gaze fixed, unwavering, as if confronting an invisible threat. Then, without warning, he let out a series of frantic, distorted barks that held an unnerving, almost human-like quality, a guttural rasp that chilled Leo to the bone, before retreating beneath the kitchen table, trembling violently. Days later, venturing into the small nearby town for supplies, Leo found himself drawn to a dusty, antiquated bookshop. The elderly proprietor, a woman with eyes that seemed to hold generations of quiet wisdom, eyed Buster, who had reluctantly accompanied Leo, with an unsettling mixture of pity and fear. She eventually pressed an old leather-bound journal into Leo's hands, its pages brittle with age. "This cabin," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of old books. "It once belonged to a recluse. They say he tinkered with things ... things best left undisturbed. His dog, a magnificent creature, was found mangled. But not by an animal. It was a dark, twisting sickness, they said, that clawed its way out from within." Her words delivered, with chilling solemnity, hinted at a horror far beyond mere local gossip. Despite the chilling encounter with the bookseller and the ominous tale of the cabin's previous occupant, Leo, ever the pragmatist, tried to rationalize the warnings. He attributed Buster's increasingly strange behavior to the isolated environment, perhaps even a residual scent of bears or other wildlife that would naturally unnerve a domestic dog. The old woman's story, he concluded, was nothing more than morbid folklore, the kind of exaggerated tale spun in small, isolated communities to entertain tourists or explain away unfortunate accidents. He clung to his logical explanations with a desperate tenacity, unwilling to acknowledge the creeping fear that threatened to dismantle his carefully constructed sense of normalcy. Yet, the rising unease in the cabin became impossible to ignore. Gnawing at the edges of his reason, cold spots manifested inexplicably, localized pockets of icy air that seemed to follow him from room to room, even near the warmth of the fireplace. Faint whispers like dry leaves skittering across wood. Sometimes drift from the direction of the cellar door, too indistinct to form words, yet undeniably present. Objects would subtly shift on their own. A heavy old mug would inexplicably slide across the kitchen counter, or a book would fall from a securely placed shelf with a soft thud. Most disturbing of all, Buster would sometimes let out a strange, choked gasp, a sound of profound distress, as if something invisible was constricting his throat, his eyes wide and panicked. Even though he appeared physically fine a moment later, driven by a desperate need to understand the source of Buster's distress and the strange occurrences, and perhaps a reckless curiosity sparked by the old woman's tale, Leo made a fateful, ill-advised decision. He located a rusted set of bolt cutters in the shed, and with a heavy heart, despite a guttural whine of protest from Buster, who cowered near the fireplace, he forced open the heavy, rusted padlock on the cellar door. The hinges shrieked in protest. As the ancient wood slowly swung inward, revealing a suffocating darkness below, thick with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else. Something subtly metallic and unpleasantly sweet. A stench that prickled at his nostrils and sent a shiver of profound revulsion down his spine. As the cellar door creaked open fully, revealing a gaping maw of blackness, a profound and ancient cold erupted from within, washing over Leo like a physical wave. Buster, who had been whimpering by the fireplace, suddenly let out a piercing, agonizing shriek, a sound utterly unlike any dog she'd ever heard, a sound born of pure, unadulterated torment. He collapsed violently to the dusty hardwood floor, his powerful body writhing, gasping for air, his eyes wide and unfocused, bloodshot, bulging from his head, as if something invisible, something monstrous, was seizing him from the inside, slowly, and inexorably choking the very life out of him, a silent, terrifying struggle for his very essence. In the immediate aftermath of Buster's horrifying collapse, Leo recoiled from the open cellar door, his mind a dizzying whirlwind of sheer panic and utter disbelief. He scrambled to his beloved golden retriever, frantically dropping to his knees beside him, his hands trembling as he tried to help, to soothe, to understand. Buster's breathing was shallow, ragged, a series of painful choked gasps that tore at Leo's heart. Yet after what felt like an eternity, unnervingly, he seemed to recover, shaking his head violently as if dazed, his powerful body convulsing once more. His eyes, however, when they finally settled on Leo's, held a new, disturbing intensity. A cold, alien gleam and a strange, almost human intelligence seemed to flicker within their dark depths, a terrifying awareness that had never been there before. An unwelcome guest, the malevolent signs emanating from the cabin multiplied with horrifying speed, transforming his sanctuary into a cacophony of unsettling sounds and spectral disturbances. The faint whispers from the cellar became louder, more insistent, forming indistinct, guttural phrases that seemed to slither into his ears, accompanied by a chilling, rhythmic thumping that reverberated from beneath the floorboards, growing steadily in frequency and intensity, like heavy objects being dragged or dropped by unseen hands. Buster, now seemingly recovered from his choking fit, began to let out strange, distorted barks that no longer sounded entirely like him. They were deeper, more resonant, almost like a human voice attempting a clumsy imitation of a dog's cry, chilling in their mimicry. Lights throughout the cabin flickered erratically, sometimes dying completely, plunging rooms into absolute darkness before sputtering back to life with an angry hum. And the air grew heavy, thick, and cloying with the sickening scent of decay. Combined with that subtle, metallic sweetness, a smell he was beginning to associate with pure, unadulterated dread. Leo began to see fleeting shadows in his peripheral vision, just beyond his direct gaze, darting across doorways or flickering at the edge of his sight, gone the moment he tried to focus on them. Ghostly echoes of unseen movement, a sudden, violent thunderstorm erupted outside, as if the heavens themselves were mirroring the terrifying chaos unfolding within the cabin. A deafening crack of thunder shook the very foundations of the old structure, immediately followed by the sickening flicker, and then complete death of all the lights. The cabin plunged into absolute impenetrable darkness, save for the furious, strobing flashes of lightning that momentarily illuminated horrifying, grotesque shadows playing across the walls, turning familiar objects into monstrous, animated shapes, dancing specters in the gloom. His cell phone, when he fumbled for it in the dark, showed absolutely no service. A dead, useless brick in his trembling hand. His old Jeep, when he desperately tried to start it, merely clicked uselessly. The engine refusing to turn over, stubbornly silent, a metallic coffin. He was utterly, completely cut off from the outside world, trapped within the house with its growing, intensifying horror, a prisoner of its dark, malevolent secrets, a toy in its hands. Asterisk nightfall, usually a time of quiet comfort and rest, now became an oppressive, terrifying entity within the cabin. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that swallowed all light, save for the furious lightning flashes that momentarily illuminated the horrifying shadows playing across the walls, transforming familiar shapes into grotesque specters, giving life to inanimate objects. The cabin felt larger, colder, its vast rooms expanding into unfathomable depths, its corners deeper, its silence more profound and terrifying than any noise, each creak and groan amplified into a monstrous roar. Every subtle sound of the old house, amplified by the pervasive quiet, seemed to become the deliberate, heavy footsteps of something unseen, something ancient and malevolent, slowly making its way through the darkened corridors towards him, seeking him out. Leo's psychological state began a rapid, terrifying fracture. He found himself constantly doubting his sanity, questioning whether he was simply grieving himself into a complete mental breakdown, inventing these horrors in his traumatized mind, a victim of his own solitude. He talked to Buster incessantly, his voice a desperate, pleading whisper, seeking comfort, seeking reassurance that he was still truly his loyal dog, a desperate attempt to cling to the familiar. But Buster's responses were increasingly unnerving, growls that now sounded undeniably like guttural, distorted human words, head tilts that mimicked human understanding with a chilling precision, and eyes that held an unnerving, unblinking intensity, a cold intelligence that was not canine. Leo found himself consumed by paranoia, compulsively checking the cellar door repeatedly, jumping at every single sound, convinced that unseen entities lurked in every shadow, pressing in from all sides. He started to feel as though he was being watched, constantly, relentlessly, even when he was demonstrably alone in a room. The oppressive weight of unseen eyes, a palpable presence on his skin, a suffocating scrutiny. Buster's personality, the very essence of his loyal companion, fundamentally shifted, becoming something alien and terrifying. He became intensely possessive of the now open cellar, guarding its dark maw with a vicious, menacing snarl if Leo even dared to approach it. His teeth bared in a silent, chilling warning. His movements, once fluid and canine, became unnaturally precise, almost human-like, a disturbing, deliberate grace that belied his animal form, a puppet controlled by unseen strings. He stared at Leo with an intensity that was no longer that of a dog, but of something ancient and intelligent, his dark eyes burning with an unsettling awareness, a profound understanding. Most chillingly, his barks occasionally transformed into raspy, half-formed words, chillingly guttural sounds that seemed to claw their way from deep within his throat. Words that Leo couldn't quite decipher, yet knew were not Buster's own, but belonged to something else, something monstrous, desperate for answers, clinging to any glimmer of hope in the deepening darkness. Leo returned to the old, musty journal the bookseller had given him, its pages brittle with age and the weight of forgotten horrors. Poring over its brittle pages by the flickering light of a single, battery-powered lantern, his heart hammering against his ribs, he discovered more chilling details about the cabin's previous owner. The recluse had been obsessed with a legendary local entity, a parasitic forest spirit known as the Whispering Root, that sought to possess living creatures, twisting them into grotesque extensions of its will. The cellar, the journal revealed, was where the recluse had attempted to trap the spirit, believing he had contained it, but had only managed to bind it more intimately to the cabin itself. The spirit fed on grief and loneliness, and its primary method of full possession began with a choking fit, a violent spiritual invasion as it wrestled for control of its new host. The horrifying truth began to solidify in Leo's mind, a terrifying realization that chilled him to the bone, turning his blood to ice. The Whispering Root, trapped by the recluse's failed ritual, was not merely haunting the cabin, a passive specter of the past. No, it was actively trying to possess Buster, or had already done so, using him as a temporary anchor, slowly, insidiously, taking him over, body and mind, consuming his essence. The initial terrifying choking Buster had experienced earlier was not a medical emergency, but the initial, violent attempt at possession, the spirit forcing its way into his very being. Fighting for control, a brutal spiritual invasion, a literal battle for his soul. Every strange sound, every chilling manifestation, every flicker of unnatural intelligence in Buster's eyes, every guttural, distorted bark, was a testament to the parasitic entity now residing within him. A monstrous new consciousness, driven by a desperate, illogical hope to save his beloved companion, to reclaim the dog he knew and loved. Leo attempted a frantic escape from the cabin, believing that if he could just get Buster out of the accursed place, he would be free. He would return to his old self, the joyful golden retriever he cherished. He grabbed Buster's collar, his voice hoarse with pleading, attempting to drag him towards the front door, his only perceived escape route. But as they reached the threshold, the possessed Buster, or rather, the entity within him, turned on him. With terrifying speed and unnatural agility, his eyes glowed with an unholy, malevolent light, a low, guttural snarl echoing from his throat that sounded undeniably, chillingly human, devoid of any canine quality, a sound of pure malice. He lunged, blocking Leo's path, his powerful body now a barrier, forcing him back into the depths of the cabin, a dark, silent guardian enforcing his imprisonment, a monstrous sentinel of the Whispering Root. Leo found himself cornered in the living room, the flickering lightning outside casting monstrous shadows that danced and writhed around him. mirroring the chaotic horror within the cabin. The possessed Buster advanced on him slowly, deliberately, his every movement radiating a terrifying, unnatural menace, a predatory grace. His growls, once merely guttural, now formed almost coherent, chilling sentences in an ancient-sounding, rasping voice that vibrated through the floorboards, a voice that was not Buster's. The air grew heavy, crackling with an almost electric energy, as if responding to the intensifying evil. Leo was utterly, profoundly alone in the suffocating darkness of the cabin, trapped within its malevolent walls, facing the terrifying, soul-crushing reality that his beloved dog was no longer himself, but a mere vessel for an ancient, insatiable evil. The violent thunderstorm raged outside, a furious symphony of wind and rain, its chaotic fury mirroring the unbridled chaos and despair within the cabin. A profound hopelessness washed over him, a crushing weight that threatened to buckle his knees as he realized the utter impossibility of his situation. How could one fight a malevolent spirit that now inhabited the very creature he loved most? In the world, the only solace he had left, every avenue of escape was blocked, every glimmer of light extinguished, every shred of hope fading into the oppressive darkness that pulsed with a malevolent energy. Yet, amidst the crushing despair, a faint flicker of defiance ignited within Leo, a desperate ember of will. He vaguely remembered the recluse's journal, specifically a fragmented drawing of an esoteric symbol and a cryptic note about severing the root from the host. A desperate, reckless plan began to form in his mind. He knew with a sudden chilling certainty that he had to fight back, not just for his own survival, but to free Buster, to somehow exorcise the malevolent entity that had stolen his loyal companion. He desperately strained his memory, recalling the symbol, a twisted root-like design, and the accompanying text that spoke of a volatile, ritualistic severance that would either free the host or destroy both in a devastating psychic backlash. Cabin became a physical battlefield for the supernatural chaos that now reigned supreme, twisting into a grotesque mockery of a home. Furniture crashed violently, hurled across rooms by unseen forces, splintering with sickening cracks. Paintings tore from walls and shattered against the floor, and icy, malevolent drafts swirled through every corridor, carrying with them the sickening scent of decay, damp earth, and profound fear. Ghostly whispers filled every room, indistinct yet menacing, forming a cacophony of disembodied voices that grated on his sanity, pushing him closer to the edge. Buster, now fully controlled, lunged and snapped at him, his movements erratic, inhumanly precise, almost mechanical, his barks warped into guttural, ancient words that resonated with the whispering root's malicious intent, taunting him with the voice of his beloved pet Dot as Leo braced himself for the final terrifying confrontation. With Buster, a sudden blinding flash of lightning outside the window illuminated the room with an eerie, stark white light. In that ephemeral instant, a horrific, fragmented vision erupted in his mind. Not of the recluse, but of his own mother, years ago, in their old home, holding a familiar, old, battered children's book, a story about a lonely tree spirit named Willow and her animal companions. Sarah gasped, a horrifying, soul-shattering realization dawning upon her. The story wasn't just a bedtime tale. It was a veiled warning, a lineage. His mother, an avid botanist with a deep connection to nature, hadn't simply been drawn to the redwoods. She had known about the whispering root, perhaps even encountered it. The block he thought he had was the spirit subtly influencing his thoughts, drawing him to this cabin, this specific location, a preordained meeting point. He was not a random victim. He was an inheritance, a legacy armed with this chilling new knowledge, a truth that twisted his stomach into knots of pure terror. Leo realized he was not fighting Buster, but the ancient spirit through Buster. He remembered a detail from the journal about the spirit's aversion to iron, a weakness. He lunged for the cast-iron poker by the cold fireplace, his movements clumsy yet driven by a desperate resolve. Not to hurt Buster, but to create a barrier, a conduit to drive the malevolent essence out. As he moved, a half-remembered nursery rhyme about iron chains and binding pains from the same children's book sprang unbidden to his lips. A desperate prayer against the darkness, a twisted incantation of his own. A violent, chaotic struggle ensued between them, a desperate dance of life and death, man against possessed beast. Buster, or rather the whispering root controlling him, fought back with unnatural, terrifying strength, his powerful jaws snapping dangerously close to Leo's face, his body writhing with a malevolent energy, a snarling, monstrous parody of his beloved dog. Leo screamed, not in pain, but in sheer terror and frustration, as he grappled with the possessed animal, trying to force the iron poker into the ground between them to complete the ritual. With a final, desperate heave, fueled by a surge of adrenaline and an aching love for his pet, he managed to stab the poker into the loose floorboard at the edge of the cellar door. A spectral, agonizing scream erupted from the very air around them, a sound of pure anguish and rage as a dark, misty form was violently ripped from Buster, swirling for a moment before being sucked back down into the gaping darkness of the cellar, which slammed shut with a thunderous bang. Buster collapsed to the floor, whimpering softly, his powerful body trembling, seemingly free, but utterly exhausted and dazed, his eyes clouded with confusion. The paranormal activity in the cabin ceased abruptly, leaving an unnerving, profound silence in its wake, broken only by Buster's ragged breathing. The storm outside, as if intrinsically linked to the spiritual turmoil within, immediately began to subside, the torrential rain tapering off to a gentle drizzle, the furious wind dying down to a soft sigh. The faint light of dawn began to filter through the cabin's windows, chasing away the oppressive shadows. Leo rushed to Buster, cradling him close, soothing his frightened whimpers. He was now his usual self, licking Leo's hand, though still shaken and disoriented, trembling against him. The cabin felt quiet again, the oppressive weight lifted, but an unspoken, palpable pall hung in the air, a lingering scent of damp earth and something akin to scorched roots, a grim reminder of the recent battle that Leo knew he couldn't stay. He packed quickly, throwing essential belongings into a duffel bag, Buster a faithful shadow by his side, his usual demeanor a stark contrast to the terror he had just endured. He needed to leave this place forever, to put miles between himself and the insidious darkness that had almost claimed them both, to escape the lingering memory of the whispering root. As he drove away, the first faint rays of the rising sun, painting the eastern sky with hues of bruised purple and pale orange, he risked a final hesitant glance in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, Buster was curled up, fast asleep, his body rising and falling with regular breaths. But as he drove further away, a familiar, unsettling whisper echoed in his mind, clearer than before. "Thank you, son." He was tiring, and then he felt it, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in his own consciousness. A fleeting thought not his own, a faint, ancient whisper that seemed to come from within him. Leo drove on, mile after agonizing mile, his grip tightening on the steering wheel, his knuckles white with a terror far colder than any he had known before. His initial relief slowly, chillingly morphed into a profound, suffocating dread as he began to recognize familiar habits creeping into his own actions, subtle mannerisms that were undeniably his mother's, the very ones he used to find endearing. He hummed a lullaby she used to sing, and as he glanced in the side mirror, his own eyes for a fleeting moment seemed to hold a glint of ancient, knowing intelligence, a profound calm amidst the chaos. He was not free. The whispering root hadn't been banished. It had merely found its true, inherited host in him, transferred from his mother the moment he had engaged with the cabin's true secret. He was the next vessel, the newest companion. Unknowingly lured to his destiny, the Jeep drove on, a solitary speck against the vast, indifferent landscape, disappearing into the rising sun. The ancient redwoods loomed in the distance, a testament to the vastness of the unknown. In the rearview mirror, Leo's eyes, now impossibly dark and ancient, devoid of their former warmth, reflected the long, desolate road ahead, a road where he too might someday be whispering to an unwitting traveler, perpetuating the grim, eternal cycle, no longer a victim, but a part of the root itself.